Galactic Chronicles.
Chapter 1. She closed her eyes. Kareth 9 didn't look like a planet anymore. It looked like the memory of one, burned down to a charcoal sketch and left under glass. Riven Hale picked his way through the valley with a limp he didn't bother hiding. The limp had become part of his balance, the way his shoulders had learned to roll under weight, the way his eyes had learned to search for movement inside stillness. Everything out here was stillness pretending it wasn't. The city ahead was a broken crown. Spires snapped halfway up, jagged as teeth. Streets buried under wind-piled ash. Starship carcasses leaned into each other like animals that had died mid-run. Every surface carried a faint shimmer of metallic dust that clung to fabric, skin, lungs, Kareth 9's last gift. He had come for parts. That was the lie that made walking easier. He told himself he was hunting salvage. Capacitors, shield coils, anything that could keep his shelter's generator from coughing itself to death. He told himself that if he didn't keep moving, the cold would get inside his bones and stay there. He told himself a lot of things. Then he saw her. She was half reclined against the twisted spine of a downed dropship, the hull peeled open like a torn can. The impact had scattered debris in a fan around her. Shattered plating, scorched insulation, a long strip of synthetic seat webbing fluttering weakly in the wind. She looked placed there, posed, like a statue somebody had knocked over and never put back. Orange fur, darkened by soot. Long vulpine ears pinned low, their white tips streaked with ash. A tail tucked close to her legs as if she could fold herself smaller than what was happening. Her suit, high-grade, layered, sleek, had been ripped across the side. Beneath it, blood soaked into the dust. Not red. Dark silver. It pooled and turned dull, like mercury losing its shine. Her breathing was wrong. Too fast, too shallow. The tremor in her hands wasn't just pain. It was the body's quiet math, the part that knows exactly how much time is left. Riven slowed without choosing to. His gloved fingers tightened around the strap of his pack. He should have turned away. He should have done a dozen things he'd learned to do the hard way. The Vulpine woman heard his boots crunch the ash. She looked up. And then, like someone finishing a prayer, she closed her eyes. No scream. No begging. No attempt to crawl. Not even a flinch toward the sidearm holstered at her thigh. Her hand wasn't steady enough to reach it anyway. Just surrender. It wasn't weakness. It was certainty. Riven stopped 3 paces from her and felt something inside him crack, something that had held for too long. He'd seen fear before. He'd lived inside it. He'd worn it like armor. He'd watched entire crews freeze when humans boarded their ships, convinced the stories were true. That humans couldn't stop, that humans didn't have off switches, that humans treated mercy like an insult. He'd also watched humans become exactly what the galaxy expected when pushed far enough. But this quiet acceptance, this sacred stillness, hit different. He reached up slowly and unsealed his helmet. The latch clicked. The seals hissed. Cold, metallic air hit his face like a slap. It tasted like burned stone and old ionization. He took one breath and felt his lungs complain. He kept his hands visible. "Hey," he said, voice rough from dust and days of too little water. "I'm not going to kill you!" The translator at her collar gave a weak chirp, like it didn't quite believe it should still be working. Her eyes stayed shut. Riven exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "Almost." "Yeah," he muttered. "That tracks." He crouched, slow enough that if she wanted to run, she could try. She didn't move. Her ears trembled once, a tiny betrayal. "You're bleeding out," he said, keeping his tone flat. "If I wanted you dead, I could just wait." That did it. Her eyelids fluttered, then lifted. Gold irises, wide and bright against a face smeared with soot. The shape of her muzzle was humanoid but distinctly vulpine, refined, sharp at the cheekbones, soft at the mouth. Her markings, faint bioluminescent lines that traced her temples and collar, were dim, pulsing like a heartbeat trying to remember its job. You speak, she whispered, like the idea had never made it into her childhood. Riven glanced at her collar. Your translator's doing the heavy lifting. Her gaze dropped to his armor. Scavenged plates. Old human composite. Bits of alien hull bolted in with crude welds. No uniform. No insignia. Except one scratched symbol near his chest, something somebody had carved in with a blade, a circle broken by a single line. A warning if you knew human myths. A joke, if you were human enough to laugh. She swallowed hard. Why? It was one word carrying a whole civilization behind it. Why didn't he shoot? Why didn't he finish? Why was he kneeling in ash instead of standing over her like the universe's final verdict? Riven reached into his pack and pulled out a med injector. The casing was battered, the label half burned away, but the cartridge still clicked into place with satisfying certainty. He held it up where she could see it. Because today's been bad enough, he said. Her muscles tightened anyway. A flinch in her shoulders, a subtle recoil of her ears. Fear, trained and automatic. But she didn't run. She watched him like he was a storm choosing where to land. Don't move, he said, then added, quieter. I know you can't, but still. He leaned in just far enough to press the injector against the torn edge of her suit. Her breath hitched. The injector hissed. Nanofibers dispersed, threading into the wound with invisible hands. Riven watched the bleeding slow, then stop. The torn tissue pulled together under the skin, not perfect, but alive. Her markings brightened a fraction, as if her body had just been reminded it was allowed to keep going. She stared at him. The look wasn't gratitude yet. It was disbelief. Like someone watching water flow uphill. You spare me, she said slowly, as if she needed to hear herself say it to believe it. Riven shrugged. Humans do that sometimes. Her eyes sharpened. Humans do not spare. He paused, feeling the old anger rise, memories of broadcasts calling humans rabid, unclean, inevitable. He let it pass through him without letting it steer. We do, he said. Just not when we're scared. Silence settled between them. Heavy, but not sharp anymore. The wind pushed ash against Riven's boots. Somewhere far off, a ship groaned as metal cooled and contracted, a long mourning sound. The sky above Kareth 9 was the color of bruised steel. What are you? She asked. A soldier? I was, Riven said. Now I'm a guy trying to keep his lights on. Her lips parted slightly. Your name? Riven hesitated. Names were hooks. Names were how people started wanting things from you. Names were how you ended up responsible. Then he looked at her again. At the way she was trying to sit up like pride could stitch flesh, at the way her eyes were still ready for the world to hurt her. Riven, he said. Riven Hale. She swallowed. Soren. The name had weight in it. Not royalty, but rank. The kind of rank you could hear in the way her translator smoothed the syllables, respectful despite the damage. Riven stood and offered his hand. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just open. Soren stared at it like it was a weapon disguised as kindness. I won't bite, he said dryly. Her ears twitched. I am not afraid of your teeth. Riven glanced at her fangs, small, clean, elegant. Yeah? Good. Her hand hovered, trembling, then reached out and touched his glove. It wasn't a grip yet. It was a test. Then her fingers closed around his. A simple handshake. An ancient, ridiculous ritual. And somewhere above the ruin, hidden in the quiet lanes of orbit, things that weren't supposed to be there watched the moment happen. Old satellites with their signatures scrubbed clean. Relays nested inside debris fields. Autonomous listening cores tucked behind broken moons, owned by factions that pretended they didn't spy. The recorders captured it all. The human removing his helmet. The medical aid. The hand extended instead of a gun. A Vulpine officer accepting it. Back on ships that had never risked atmosphere, analysts would replay the feed and argue over pixels. Priests of prediction would insist it was deception. Strategists would demand to know what the human wanted. They wouldn't understand the simplest truth. He hadn't wanted anything. He'd just seen her close her eyes. And something inside him had refused to become the monster she expected. Riven released her hand and nodded toward the wreck behind her. Can you stand? Soren tested her side, grimaced. I can move. Good enough, he said. Come with me. Before the scavengers show up. Her eyes narrowed. You are a scavenger. Riven gave her a look. I'm a polite one. A pause. Then, painfully, Soren pushed herself upright. Her tail dragged through the ash behind her, leaving a faint line like a signature. Riven adjusted his pack, then turned and started walking without checking if she followed. It was a small mercy, too, giving her space to choose. She followed anyway. Behind them, the ruins kept burning in low places, small stubborn fires refusing to die. Above them, the Watchers kept watching. And across the galaxy, a story that had always ended one way had just failed to do so. Chapter 2: The Monster That Didn't Act Like One. Riven didn't look back until he reached the edge of the collapsed transit corridor. He didn't need to. He could hear her footsteps behind him, light, uneven, carefully placed. Vulpine gait. Digitigrade, even through injury. She moved like someone trained to cross dangerous ground without leaving unnecessary evidence. That alone told him she wasn't cargo or civilian. Whatever she'd been before the crash, she'd mattered. The corridor yawned open like a broken throat. Once it had ferried commuters between districts. Now it was a half-buried trench of twisted alloy and fractured light panels. The roof collapsed in places. The floor sloped at a shallow angle toward darkness. Riven dropped down first, boots crunching on debris, then turned just enough to offer his arm. Soren hesitated. Her people didn't accept help casually. Assistance created obligation. Obligation created leverage. Leverage created hierarchy. That was the logic she'd been raised in. She took his arm anyway. Her grip was light, almost formal, as if she were bracing against a railing instead of a human. He felt the tremor in her fingers and ignored it. Pride was doing enough work already. The corridor swallowed them. Inside, the air was warmer, trapped heat and stale ozone. Emergency strips along the walls still glowed faint blue, scavenged power leaking from somewhere deeper. Riven flicked his wrist and activated a low-lumen lamp on his forearm. It cast long shadows that stretched and worked across the walls. Soren's ears twitched constantly, tracking echoes. Every sound made her shoulders tense. You expect pursuit? Riven said. Yes, she replied without hesitation. Recovery units. Or silence teams. He snorted softly. You folks really commit to your branding. She glanced at him, confused. Branding? Never mind. They moved deeper. The city above them faded into a dull vibration, distant and unfocused. Here, beneath layers of ruin, the world felt smaller. Contained. Survivable. Riven stopped at a sealed door marked with half-erased transit glyphs and a human stencil that read Keep out or don't, I'm not your dad. He keyed in a short sequence on a battered panel. The lock cycled with a tired whine. The door slid open. Soren froze. The shelter wasn't elegant. It wasn't symmetrical. It wasn't optimized the way Vulpine structures were. It was stubborn. Reinforced walls made from mismatched plating. A generator embedded directly into the floor, cables routed like veins through the space. Weapons mounted neatly along one wall, not displayed, not hidden. Tools everywhere. Half-built devices suspended mid-thought, as if the room itself expected to be interrupted and continued later. Human space. Honest, ugly, functional. Riven stepped aside. Home. She crossed the threshold slowly, senses overloaded. Her training screamed at her to catalog exits, power sources, threat vectors. She did all of that automatically. What unsettled her was what didn't fit. No restraints. No containment field. No interrogation array. You live here alone, she said. Most days. You are not concerned I might kill you in your sleep. Riven set his pack down and started removing gear, movements practiced and efficient. You could try. I snore pretty loud, though. Ruins the element of surprise. She stared. You make humor out of risk. Yeah, he said. Keeps it from owning me. He knelt beside a storage unit and pulled out a water flask, tossing it to her. She caught it reflexively, then paused, sniffed it, scanned it with the small diagnostic node still embedded in her gauntlet. Clean. Potable. Human. She drank. The relief was immediate and embarrassing. Her markings brightened another shade. Riven noticed. He didn't comment. She lowered herself onto a bench near the wall, careful with her injured side. Why bring me here? She asked. You could have left me stabilized. Distance yourself. He leaned against a worktable, arms crossed. Because that valley's visible from orbit. Too many eyes. Her ears angled forward. You know you are observed. I assume I am, he said. Keeps me polite. That earned him a long look. You are aware of what my people believe about yours, she said. Hard to miss, Riven replied. You put it in a lot of briefings. Educational vids, too. Very dramatic music. She bristled. You are a destabilizing species. You escalate conflicts. You ignore lost thresholds. You refuse surrender. Riven's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. Less casual. More present. Yeah, he said. When people corner us, that happens. You are doing it again, she said. Reframing. He shook his head. No. I'm explaining. She studied him carefully now. No armor. No weapon in hand. The scars on his forearms were old and layered, healed badly in places where medical care had been delayed or improvised. This was not a being shaped by control. This was someone shaped by endurance. You were taught to fear us, he continued. So you built models where fear was the variable. Every outcome starts looking the same after that. Her markings dimmed slightly. Thought. Conflict. We ran projections, she said. Human expansion curves. Resource volatility. Casualty tolerance. You exceeded every stability index. Riven smiled faintly. Yeah. We hate spreadsheets. She almost laughed. Almost. The shelter lights flickered once, then steadied. Soren stiffened instantly. That was not internal fluctuation. Riven pushed off the table and moved to the console wall, fingers flying. The holographic display snapped to life, projecting a crude orbital map. Scan sweeps. Multiple. Vulpine signatures. They're searching, she said quietly. For me. And for whatever scared you enough to disappear. He added. If they find me here, she said, they will assume coercion or collaboration. Riven glanced at her. Which one's worse? She didn't answer immediately. Collaboration, she said finally. Because it implies choice. He nodded once. Figures. The scans edged closer. Lines sweeping across the ruined city with clinical patience. Soren rose unsteadily. You should leave. Now. My presence increases your risk profile. Riven didn't move. So does breathing. She stared at him. You cannot win against a recovery fleet. I'm not trying to win, he said. I'm trying to change the math. Her ears pinned back. That is not how power works. Riven turned, eyes sharp now, something dangerous and alive behind them. That's what everyone says right before it does. He tapped a command. Behind him, a structure she hadn't noticed before began to hum, a lattice of scavenged human circuitry wrapped around a core of Vulpine crystal tech. It shouldn't have interfaced. The tolerances were wrong. The energy languages incompatible. It powered up anyway. Soren took an involuntary step back. You cannot operate that. Your neural architecture is messy, Riven finished. Yeah. Heard that. The hum deepened. Outside, in orbit, something impossible happened. A signal bloomed across secure Vulpine command channels. Not a breach. An opening. Soren's communicator flared to life, flooded with priority pings. Riven looked at her. Quick question. Her voice was tight. What? How much authority do you carry when you speak? She swallowed. Enough to be listened to. Perfect, he said. Before she could stop him, he pressed a small injector against the base of her neck. It burned for half a second, then vanished into warmth. What did you? Stabilizer, he said. And a relay sync. You're about to be very visible. The device behind him surged. Across the fleet, screens lit up. Soren's face filled them. Behind her, unmistakable human tech. Beside her, a human standing unrestrained. Unafraid. Riven leaned into frame and gave a small wave. Hi, he said. We should probably talk. Across the galaxy, certainty cracked. And fear, for the first time, didn't know where to land. Chapter 3. Vulpine blood on human hands. Silence hit harder than any weapon. Across the Viral Accord command lattice, officers froze mid-motion. Data scribes stopped annotating. Predictive cores spooled and stalled, choking on inputs that refused to converge. The image stayed fixed on every display, a Vulpine envoy alive, standing, speaking freely, protected by a human who looked disturbingly unthreatened. Soren felt the weight of it immediately. Her pulse spiked, bioluminescent markings flaring bright along her temples and collar. She had spoken in front of councils before. She had delivered casualty projections that decided wars. None of that compared to this. This was not doctrine. This was exposure. This is Soren of the Viral Accord, she said, voice steady by force of discipline. I am alive. I am not restrained. I am not under duress. A ripple of motion passed through the command chambers. Officers leaned closer to their stations. Several high-ranking figures moved into frame, their markings controlled but sharp with agitation. Envoy Soren, a voice said at last. Male. Senior. Strategic command. You are to disengage from the human immediately. Riven tilted his head slightly, listening without speaking. He kept his hands visible. Not submissive. Intentional. I will not, Soren replied. The word landed like a fracture. You are compromised, the commander said. Your proximity to a human asset presents unacceptable risk. Riven snorted under his breath. Asset. That's new. Soren continued. I was wounded in combat. The human rendered aid without coercion or demand. That does not negate threat models, the commander snapped. Humans do not act without intent. Riven leaned closer to the camera, expression calm but focused. We do. You just don't log it. Several junior officers flinched as if he'd struck the channel. You will remain silent, the commander said, eyes locking onto Riven. This is not a negotiation. Riven smiled faintly. That's usually when it is. Soren stepped half a pace forward, placing herself between Riven and the projection. The gesture was subtle. Protective. Every observer noticed. The human has not threatened me, she said. He has not interrogated me. He has not requested extraction or leverage. He has offered shelter. Shelter is a form of captivity. Another voice interjected. Elder Council. Older, colder. Soren's ears flicked back. Then so is your command chamber. The channel erupted into layered speech. Arguments, overrides, protocol citations. Riven watched it like weather, not reacting, just cataloging patterns. When the noise crested, he spoke again. Can I say something? Several commanders turned as one. Soren felt the shift. The way attention bent toward him despite every effort to keep him marginal. You already have. the lead commander said. Riven shrugged. Fair. He rested a hand on the console beside him, grounding himself. You've been watching us for a long time. Running sims? Counting losses before they happen? That's fine. We do that too, when we can afford the time. Soren glanced at him, surprised by the lack of heat in his voice. But you made a mistake, he continued. You treated us like a reaction instead of a species. The commander's markings flared. You escalated every engagement. Because every engagement was framed as containment, Riven replied. You never left room for anything else. A pause. Not silence. Hesitation. Soren felt it ripple outward. The models recalculating. The wordless awareness that something fundamental was being forced to move. You attacked our colonies, the commander said. You burned installations. Riven's jaw tightened. Just slightly. You ran experiments on our civilians. We noticed. The feed wavered. Soren's chest tightened. That information was classified. Buried in layers of abstraction and euphemism. The commander didn't deny it. You are unpredictable, he said instead. Riven nodded. That's fair. Soren turned to him sharply. You accept that? I accept reality, Riven said. You should try it sometime. The commander raised a hand. Envoy Soren, step away from the human. This transmission will end. The channel began to destabilize, priority protocols initiating. Soren reacted before she fully realized she was moving. Wait. Her voice cut clean through the noise. I choose this, she said. I choose to remain. The command chamber stilled. You do not understand the implications, the elder said slowly. I understand them, Soren replied. I understand the cost of misunderstanding humans. She turned, meeting Riven's eyes briefly. Something passed between them, acknowledgement maybe. Trust, fragile and unfinished. You fear humans because they escalate, she said to the fleet. But escalation is not their defining trait. The commander scoffed. Then what is? Soren took a breath. Adaptation? Riven blinked, surprised. She continued, steadier now. They change behavior under pressure faster than any species we have encountered. They repurpose loss into strategy. They convert fear into function. Behind her, Riven tapped the console. The shelter's walls flickered, then became translucent projections, revealing the lattice of defenses woven through the ruins outside. Shield harmonics stitched together from scrap. Energy redirection channels carved through broken infrastructure. It was crude. It was brilliant. You built this? Soren asked quietly. Out of trash and bad attitudes, Riven said. Turns out both are plentiful. The command chamber erupted again, but the tone had changed. Less certainty. More alarm. That structure should not operate, the commander said. The energy tolerances. Our suggestions, Riven finished. The channel cut abruptly. No dismissal. No threat. Just absence. Soren exhaled shakily, her markings dimming to a softer glow. The shelter felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. They will not forget this, she said. Riven nodded. Neither will anyone else. The console chimed again, new signals, dozens of them. Not attacks. Inquiries. Encrypted pings from neutral systems. Fringe alliances. Data guilds who had been watching the Accord for centuries and just saw something crack. They're paying attention, Soren whispered. Good, Riven said. Means they're thinking. She turned to him fully now, studying his face like a map she hadn't known existed. You have placed me at odds with my own people. He met her gaze. You stepped into that camera yourself? Then she nodded. Yes. I did. Outside, skin patterns shifted. The recovery fleets pulled back just enough to signal restraint. Not retreat. Consideration. Across the galaxy, threat assessment archives updated in real time. Old labels were deprecated. New ones added with reluctant care. Humanity, unstable variable. Secondary note, exhibits restraint under exposure. Tertiary flag, behavior deviates from expected escalation models. One analyst, somewhere far from Kareth 9, added a final line before closing the file. Do not assume fear defines them. Soren looked at the stars beyond the shelter's false walls and felt something unfamiliar take root. Not safety. Possibility. Chapter 4, Shelter Made of Ruins. The first shot didn't come from the virile accord. That was the detail no one had modeled for. A hard white flash flared across the shelter's external sensors, followed half a second later by a concussive tremor that rattled the walls and sent dust raining from the ceiling seams. Alarms barked once, then settled into a low, urgent thrum. Riven was already moving. He crossed the room in 3 strides, fingers snapping across the console, pulling up external feeds. The image resolved into chaos, a section of skyline collapsing inward, molten debris sliding down the sides of a fractured spire. That wasn't orbital, he muttered. Angle's wrong. Soren felt it too now, the energy signature, raw and uneven, bleeding across the spectrum. Not virile precision. Not sanctioned. Independent fleets, she said. Or proxies. Riven's mouth curved into a humorless smile. They saw the broadcast. They think the uncertainty is an opening, she said. If they strike first, they define the narrative. Yeah, Riven replied. They always do. Another impact struck farther out, the shockwave rolling through the ruins like a slow breath. The shelter shields flared, absorbed the edge of it, then dimmed. Soren's ears pinned back. Your defenses will not hold against sustained bombardment. Riven didn't argue. He didn't need to. He slammed his palm onto a recessed control panel Soren hadn't noticed before. The floor beneath them vibrated. What are you doing? She demanded. Letting them see the whole house, he said. A deep mechanical groan rolled through the shelter as sections of the outer walls began to separate, unfolding outward like armored petals. Buried structures rose from beneath the rubble, lifting on pistons scavenged from cargo lifters and heavy mining rigs. Power conduits flared to life, energy racing through channels that had been carved directly into the ruined bedrock. Soren stared. You hid this under a city. Riven shrugged. People stopped looking at rubble. The external feeds widened. What had looked like random ruins resolved into pattern, nodes, anchors, mirrored surfaces positioned with ugly, practical intent. A defense grid assembled itself from the bones of a dead city. The incoming ships fired again. This time, the beams bent. They curved as if caught by invisible hands, sliding away from the shelter and dissipating harmlessly into the sky. The air shimmered where the energy was redirected, rippling like heat over stone. Soren's breath caught. You are refracting phase energy. With math I don't fully understand, Riven said, rerouting power. And instincts I trust more than manuals. The mercenary fleet hesitated. That hesitation mattered. Across listening posts and observation platforms, sensors spiked. Neutral fleets leaned closer. Data cores flagged the anomaly. The mercenaries adjusted targeting, switching frequencies, escalating output. Riven let them. What are you doing? Soren asked, tension threading her voice. Teaching, he replied. He triggered the next sequence. A pulse rolled outward, not destructive, not bright. It was quiet, almost polite. A wave of interference that slid into the mercenary ships like fog. Their comms screamed. Weapon locks flickered. Navigation systems stuttered, then froze. One by one, the ships drifted, suddenly blind and deaf, alive but helpless. The feed snapped to an open channel as a furious alien face filled the screen. Leathery skin, multiple eyes, insignia of a private warlord. You have no authority, the mercenary snarled. Stand down. Riven leaned toward the mic. Authority's overrated. He toggled another switch. The channel widened. Every observer, Every listening fleet, every system that had been quietly recording suddenly had access. "This is Riven Hale," he said simply. "I'm human." The galaxy listened. "You're watching because you're nervous," he continued. "You're trying to decide if we're monsters or miracles." The mercenary ships drifted in the background, powerless. "Here's the boring truth," Riven said. "We're neither." He glanced at Soren, then back to the camera. "We're problem solvers." Another pulse rippled outward, cleaner this time. The mercenary fleet's power cores shut down completely, failsafes tripping in cascading order. The ships went dark but intact, left floating like stunned animals. No explosion. No debris. Just silence. The message landed harder than any kill tally. Soren felt the shift like a pressure change in her chest. Viral command vessels adjusted formation, not to attack, but to shield. Neutral fleets moved closer, not farther away. "They're choosing restraint," she whispered. Riven nodded. "Ripple effect." The shelter lights dimmed as systems powered down, the machinery settling into a low, contented hum. Outside, the ruins of Karath 9 lay quiet again, smoke curling lazily into the sky. Soren turned to him slowly. "You just altered the strategic balance of this region." Riven shrugged. "I helped someone who needed it. Everything else was math catching up. That is what frightens them," she said softly. He met her gaze. "That's what frightens us, too." A new signal cut through the aftermath, encrypted, high priority. Soren recognized the signature instantly. High Council. Her people. The projection formed. Multiple elders, their bioluminescence muted but tense, eyes sharp with calculation and something else, unease. "Envoy Soren," one said. "You will return immediately." The weight of generations pressed down on her shoulders. She didn't look at Riven. "Not yet." "I will return," she said. A collective exhale rippled through the council. "But not alone." Shock flared across their markings. "You would bring a human into viral space?" another demanded. "Yes," Soren replied. "Because if we do not understand them now, someone else will. And they will not be kind." The elders exchanged glances. Calculations raced behind their eyes. Riven raised an eyebrow. "No pressure." Soren's mouth curved, just barely. "You are accustomed to it." After a long moment, the council inclined their heads. Agreement, reluctant but real. The channel closed. Riven exhaled, a slow release he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well, that's new. You are walking into the heart of a civilization that fears you," Soren said. He shrugged. "Story of my species." Outside, distant fleets repositioned. History adjusted its footing. Soren looked at the stars beyond the shelter and understood something with quiet clarity. Humanity didn't survive chaos by overpowering it. They lived inside it. And the galaxy was about to find out what that meant. Chapter 5: What Humans Were Supposed to Do. The viral capital did not burn. That fact alone unsettled half the galaxy. Lethrin Prime rose beneath them like a living construct, its surface layered in interlocking city plates that shifted subtly to manage load, energy flow, and population density. Towers of crystal alloy spiraled upward, their bioluminescent veins pulsing in synchronized patterns that reflected civic order. Orbital shields wrapped the planet in translucent bands, probability fields humming softly as they bent incoming data and light alike. Riven stood at the viewport of the small transit vessel, arms folded, watching the world approach. "Well," he said, "at least it's not trying to kill us." Soren stood beside him, posture composed, ears upright. Calm on the outside. Turbulence beneath. "You are the first human permitted to land here," she said. "Every defense system is active." "Comforting," Riven replied. "I hate surprises." The vessel pierced the shield envelope without incident. No warning shots. No automated challenges. Just a clean corridor opening where none should have existed. That made several observers nervous. The landing platform was vast and empty, polished to a mirror sheen. Honor guards lined the perimeter, Vulpine soldiers in ceremonial armor, weapons present but lowered. Their eyes tracked Riven with controlled intensity. No hatred. No fear on the surface. Below that calculation, Riven stepped onto virile ground unarmed. That detail spread faster than the footage. The council chamber awaited them, carved into the heart of a spire whose interior walls flowed like liquid crystal. Light refracted softly across curved surfaces, the space designed to induce clarity, calm, submission. It had worked on countless envoys from countless species. Riven felt it and ignored it. The elders watched from elevated platforms, their markings intricate, layered with age and authority. Some leaned forward. Others sat back, tails still, ears angled just enough to listen without revealing too much. "You stand before us without restraint," one elder said. "Is this a tactic?" Riven looked around the chamber, then back at the speaker. "No. It's a habit." A ripple passed through the council. Discomfort. Confusion. "You understand the risk," another elder said. "Humans escalate conflict beyond recovery thresholds." Riven nodded. "That's what you were taught." Soren's ears flicked. "You burned cities," the elder continued. "You shattered fleets. You refused surrender." Riven's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. "You built cages around our options," he said. "Then acted surprised when we broke the bars." Silence followed. Not offended silence. Processing silence. "You could have destroyed the mercenary fleet," an elder said. "You chose not to." "Destruction's expensive," Riven replied. "And lazy." The words landed harder than accusation. "You believe restraint is strength," the elder said. "I believe restraint is leverage," Riven answered. "You just haven't seen anyone use it without asking permission." An alert chimed through the chamber. External sensors. Multiple signatures emerging from fold space. Soren felt the shift immediately. "Not virile," she said. "A rival coalition. They have been watching." The elders stiffened. Defensive projections flared around the chamber. "They intend to test this moment," Soren added. "If we fracture now, they define the outcome." Riven stepped forward a half pace. "Then don't fracture." "You propose we trust human intervention," an elder said coolly. "I propose you let humans help," Riven replied. "Plural." He tapped a small control node at his wrist. The chamber filled with holograms. Human colonies. Not warships, people. Engineers rerouting power grids. Miners converting extraction lasers into shield emitters. Civilian pilots forming ad hoc relays. No central command. No grand formation. Coordination without hierarchy. The rival fleet fired. The galaxy watched as something unprecedented unfolded. Human signals propagated faster than the attack itself. Energy was absorbed, redirected, diffused across layers of improvised infrastructure and virile precision systems working in parallel. No single point of failure. No clean target. The attack unraveled? Not shattered. Unraveled. The rival fleet retreated, confused and intact, their strike dissolved before it could become history. The council stared, not at the technology, but at the method. "You do not seek dominance," an elder said slowly. "No," Riven replied. "We seek survivability with options." The eldest among them rose. "We will revise our classification of humanity," she declared. "Not as an existential threat, but as a contextual force." Riven let out a breath. "That's the nicest thing anyone's called us in a while." Later, as their vessel departed the spire, stars sliding back into view, Soren stood beside him once more. "You have changed everything," she said. Riven shook his head. "I just didn't do what everyone expected." Soren watched the galaxy stretch out before them, golden eyes reflecting distant light. "That," she said softly, is exactly what makes humans dangerous. And across 1,000 systems, records updated, doctrines cracked, and a new understanding began to spread. Humanity was no longer defined by fear. They had turned it into possibility. Chapter 6: The Signal No One Modeled. The first sign that things had truly changed wasn't a declaration. It was traffic. As the vessel carrying Riven and Soren cleared viral space, comm channels began to populate with requests that didn't fit any existing category. Not threats. Not negotiations. Not demands wrapped in courtesy. Questions. Neutral coalitions pinged for clarification. Observer guilds requested raw telemetry. Fringe systems asked, carefully, whether humans were open to third-party collaboration. Even minor powers, species that had survived by staying small and quiet, leaned out of the dark just enough to look. Soren watched the traffic scroll past, her tail slowly swaying behind her. "They are recalibrating," she said. "Your existence inside their models has destabilized the margins." Riven reclined in the pilot's chair, boots hooked under a console rail. "Good. Margins are where interesting stuff happens. You realize this attention will not fade," she said. "You have made humanity legible." He glanced at her. "That's supposed to scare me?" "It should concern you," she replied. "Visibility invites pressure." Riven considered that, then shrugged. "We've been under pressure since we figured out fire was useful." The vessel's internal lights dimmed slightly as the NAV systems rerouted around a growing cluster of signal traffic. Outside, stars slid past in long, quiet arcs. "What they saw on Kareth 9," Soren continued, "contradicted every historical archive. Humans showing restraint at scale. Coordination without command. Mercy without weakness." She paused. "It will not be forgiven easily." Riven nodded. "Yeah. Breaking expectations tends to piss people off." A new alert chimed. Different tone. Riven sat up. "That's not civilian chatter," he said. The NAV display populated with unfamiliar markers. Sleek, angular signatures emerging from folded space well outside standard engagement lanes. Too clean to be mercenaries. Too quiet to be scouts. Soren's markings dimmed. "The Keeler Syndicate," she said. "They profit from instability. They have never engaged humanity directly. Guess they got curious," Riven replied. "They will attempt to isolate you," she said. "Test response thresholds. Force you into escalation." Riven's mouth twitched. "They always want a baseline." The Syndicate hail came through moments later, crisp and controlled. "Human vessel," the voice said. "You are operating outside acceptable behavioral parameters." Riven blinked. "That's a new one. You have disrupted established deterrence frameworks," the voice continued. "This creates unacceptable volatility." Soren leaned forward slightly. "They are framing you as a system error." Riven keyed the channel open. "You could say that." A pause. Not static. Consideration. "We propose a correction," the Syndicate voice said. "Submit to containment for assessment." Riven laughed. Not loud. Just once. "No. You misunderstand," the voice replied. "Compliance prevents consequences." Riven's eyes hardened. "That's where you're wrong." He didn't raise shields. Didn't power weapons. Instead, he routed the channel outward. Every observer. Every listening post. Every system that had been watching quietly from the edges. "You're all tuned in anyway," Riven said. "Might as well make it official." Soren turned to him sharply. "You are escalating visibility." "Exactly," he replied. The Syndicate ships adjusted formation, weapons warming. Pressure building. Riven leaned back into frame, calm as ever. "You're trying to decide what humans do next," he said. "Here it is." He tapped a final command. Across human space, not centralized, not ordered, systems responded. Not fleets. Signals. Offers. Solutions. Navigation lanes rerouted. Energy grids opened surplus capacity. Civilian networks offered redundancy. Engineers volunteered fixes before problems fully formed. No command. Only response. The syndicate hesitated. Again, that hesitation mattered. You cannot coordinate this rapidly, the voice said. There is no authority structure. Riven smiled. You're confusing authority with agreement. The pressure dissipated. Slowly. Reluctantly. The syndicate ships withdrew, not defeated, but unsettled, models rewritten mid-calculation. The channel went quiet. Soren exhaled, a sound halfway between awe and dread. They will record this as the first uncontrolled signal cascade. Riven nodded. We call it helping. She studied him, ears angled forward. You are turning unpredictability into doctrine. Yeah, he said. Keeps people honest. Outside, the stars didn't care. Inside, the galaxy adjusted again. And somewhere deep in an archive that had never needed revision before, a new file was opened. Designation: Human Adaptive Signal. Status: Active. Recommendation: Do not provoke without understanding response topology. Soren watched the data finalize and felt the shape of the future shift, subtle, irreversible. The signal no one had modeled was no longer a moment. It was a pattern. And it was spreading. Chapter 7: When the pattern became a threat. The phrase showed up 3 times before anyone admitted it mattered. Once in a syndicate internal brief, buried beneath probability charts and loss tables. Once in a neutral observer's addendum, flagged as speculative language. Once in a Viral Council footnote, appended by an analyst who had not slept in 40 hours. Human pattern persistence. No one liked it. Everyone kept it. Riven didn't know any of that yet. He was back on Kareth 9, boots on broken stone, breathing air that tasted like rust and memory. The shelter hummed behind him, systems stable, defenses folded back into the ruins where they belong. Soren stood nearby, watching the sky with the kind of focus that came from waiting for something you hoped wouldn't arrive. They're reorganizing, she said. Not retreating. Not advancing. Riven squinted upward. That's usually the dangerous part. She nodded. When institutions stop reacting and start adapting. He chuckled softly. Welcome to the club. The first sign wasn't a fleet. It was silence. Long-range chatter dropped off. Neutral observers went dark one by one, not destroyed, choosing absence. Trade routes rerouted without explanation. Syndicate proxies vanished from known lanes. Even viral internal traffic tightened, messages compressed, language formalized. Containment behavior. They're trying to starve the pattern, Soren said quietly. Reduce interaction. Limit exposure. Riven leaned against a slab of collapsed wall. They think if they stop looking at us, we'll stop happening. Yes. He smiled thinly. Bold strategy. A pulse rippled through the shelter, soft, internal. A new message queued itself without tripping alarms. Riven frowned. That's not from any channel I recognize. Soren's markings dimmed. Neither do I. The message resolved into a simple data packet. No encryption. No header. No identifiable origin. Just coordinates. And a timestamp. They're baiting you, Soren said immediately. Riven stared at the projection. Yeah. You cannot keep responding to every pressure point, she added. Patterns become predictable when they're overused. He considered that. You saying I should ignore it? I'm saying this is how systems force variables into roles, she replied. Hero. Threat. Catalyst. Once defined, options collapse. Riven exhaled slowly. Here's the problem. She looked at him. If I don't show up, he said, they learn something about us. If I do, they learn something else. And either way, Soren said, understanding dawning, the observation continues. Exactly. The sky above Kareth 9 shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible. A distortion at the edge of the spectrum. Something large, patient, and very deliberate slipping into position. Soren stiffened. They are deploying a null lattice. Riven's eyes sharpened. Translation? A suppression field, she said. Designed to flatten adaptive responses. It penalizes deviation. Forces outcomes back toward expected norms. Riven let out a low whistle. They built a box for chaos. They built it for you. The shelter systems flickered, not failing, but struggling, like a living thing pushing against a constraint it didn't recognize. Riven stepped toward the console. Can you get me specs? I can get you doctrine, she replied. They believe adaptability is a phase. Something that exhausts itself. Riven grinned, feral and tired. That's their mistake. Outside, the ruins trembled as the lattice settled into place, invisible pressure pressing down on everything that tried to move differently. Across the galaxy, analysts watched human signals flatten. Response times slowed. Redundancies failed to propagate. The pattern appeared to stall. Relief spread through command chambers. Then Riven did something small. He shut the shelter down. Power dropped. Signals died. The ruins went dark. Soren turned sharply. What are you doing? Going quiet, he said. If they're measuring reaction, let's give them none. The lattice held. Waiting. Minutes passed. Then hours. And somewhere deep inside the suppression field, something unexpected began to happen. Human systems didn't respond faster. They responded sideways. Analog relays kicked in. Physical couriers launched from forgotten outposts. Old trade languages resurfaced. Agreements bypassed networks entirely, passed mouth to mouth, ship to ship. The pattern didn't break. It changed shape. Soren felt it before she could explain it, a pressure release, a subtle wrongness in the lattice's assumptions. They designed it to suppress escalation, she whispered. Not absence. Riven opened his eyes, calm and certain. Yeah. We're really good at that. Above Kareth 9, the null lattice began to destabilize, not from overload, but from irrelevance. Too many interactions happening where it wasn't looking. Across the galaxy, new alerts fired. Human pattern persistence, confirmed. Adaptation vector, nonlinear. Containment efficacy, degrading. Soren looked at Riven with something close to awe. You didn't fight it. He shrugged. Sometimes the loudest move is stepping out of frame. The lattice shuddered. And for the first time since humanity had reached the stars, the galaxy realized something too late. You couldn't box a species that knew how to disappear without giving up ground. The pattern wasn't a threat because it was aggressive. It was a threat because it could choose when not to be. Chapter 8: The Day the Galaxy Waited. The lattice didn't fail all at once. That would have been comforting. Explosions, cascading alerts, something you could point at and say this is the moment control was lost. Instead, it hesitated. Across command arrays and observation decks, indicators flickered into amber states that had no precedent. Not danger. Not stability. Uncertainty without escalation. Human traffic stayed low. Too low. No countersignals. No retaliation. No defiance broadcasts. No adaptive surge that the models had been trained to anticipate. Just absence, punctuated by small, untraceable movements that refused to align into anything measurable. The galaxy waited. On Kareth 9, the ruins lay quiet under a sky pressed flat by invisible force. The shelter remained dark, its systems cold, its signature erased into the noise floor of a dead world. Soren sat cross-legged on the stone floor, eyes closed, listening to the hum of nothing. They are holding, she said softly. Every major power is paused. Fleets powered, weapons hot, command authorities standing by. Riven leaned against the wall, hands loose at his sides. Waiting for us to blink. Yes. He smiled faintly. We won't. Hours passed. Then more. The lattice strained, not because it was being challenged, but because it was being ignored. Its predictive scaffolding relied on pressure feedback loops. Stimulus and response. Threat and counter-threat. Humans weren't giving it any of that. Instead, analog traffic bloomed beneath detection thresholds. Low-tech couriers slipped between systems using pre-filled routes considered obsolete. Barter codes resurfaced. Old mutual aid compacts, never logged, never centralized, reactivated themselves quietly. The pattern didn't announce itself. It simply kept going. Soren opened her eyes, markings glowing faintly. They are beginning to argue. Riven glanced at her. Who? Everyone, she said. About intent. About whether you are preparing something larger. He shook his head. That's the funniest part. What? They still think the point is scale. A tremor rippled through the air, not physical, informational. The lattice tried to tighten, to reassert relevance. It failed to catch anything meaningful. Because the most important movements weren't signals anymore. They were choices. In distant systems, minor species resumed trade with humans despite advisories. Not openly. Not defiantly. Just enough to keep things alive. Repair crews accepted human assistance without filing reports. Navigation guilds shared routes off record. Tiny acts? Unreportable acts. Soren felt the weight of it settle in her chest. You are forcing them to confront something they cannot punish without revealing weakness. Riven nodded. You can't sanction cooperation that never asks permission. The first official fracture came from an unexpected place. A virile border command quietly stood down a patrol that had no clear mission. No announcement. No justification. Just a notation, resources reallocated. Then a syndicate logistics hub rerouted traffic away from a potential flashpoint, citing internal inefficiency. Then a neutral observer collective downgraded its human risk advisory from imminent to indeterminate. Each change was small. Together, they rewrote the tempo of power. Soren stood slowly, awe threading through her composure. They are no longer driving the timeline. Riven met her gaze. Yeah. Now they're reacting to it. Above Kareth 9, the null lattice flickered. Not collapsing. Letting go. It powered down in stages, failing safely, retreating without acknowledgement. No one wanted to be the first to admit it hadn't worked. The pressure lifted. The sky breathed again. Soren exhaled, shoulders lowering for the first time in days. You didn't force them into peace. Riven smiled, tired and real. Nah. I just made war inconvenient. Across the galaxy, a quiet realization spread. One no doctrine had prepared for. Humanity wasn't destabilizing systems by attacking them. They were destabilizing them by refusing to play loud. By choosing patience over spectacle. By letting everyone else be the ones who escalated, or didn't. The day ended without a shot fired. Without a treaty signed. Without a victory declared. And that, more than anything, unsettled the galaxy. Because for the first time, humanity had set the pace by doing almost nothing at all. And everyone else had followed. Chapter 9, The Invitation That Changed Shape. The message arrived 3 days later. Not encrypted. Not routed through official channels. Not delivered with authority stamps or escalation markers. It came through an old civilian relay that hadn't been updated in decades, tagged with a protocol most modern systems ignored as obsolete. Soren noticed it first. This channel shouldn't be active, she said, ears angling forward as the console chimed softly. Riven looked up from the generator he was rebuilding. Define shouldn't. She brought the projection up between them. No crest. No faction identifier. Just a single line of text, translated cleanly. We would like to understand how you decide. Riven stared at it for a long moment. That's new, he said. Multiple sources. Layered. Neutral, syndicate adjacent, fringe polities, At least one council node pretending not to be here. A focus group, Riven muttered. Galaxy-wide. They are afraid of misjudging you again, Soren said. And afraid of admitting they already have. Riven considered that. So this is an invitation. Yes. To what? She hesitated. To speak. Without leverage. Without theater. Riven laughed once, short and incredulous. That's reckless. From them, she agreed. Which makes it important. The ruins outside the shelter were quieter now. Not safe. Never safe. But less hunted. Less watched. The galaxy had learned to avert its eyes just enough to breathe. Riven sat on a crate, elbows on his knees. If I answer, I'd become a reference point. Soren nodded. If you don't, they fill the silence for you. He grimaced. That always goes great. She stepped closer. You don't have to represent humanity. Riven looked up at her. Someone already decided I do. A pause. Then he straightened. Okay, he said. I'll answer. Soren's ears lifted. What will you say? He thought about the valley where he'd found her. The way she'd closed her eyes. The way the universe had expected a certain ending. The truth, he said. No polish. He keyed the channel open. The reply went out on the same quiet relay, no amplification, no broadcast framing. Anyone listening had to be listening on purpose. You want to know how we decide, Riven said. We don't start with outcomes. We start with people. The channel stayed open. No interruption. When systems hurt people, we break systems, he continued. When people hurt people, we try to stop that too. Sometimes we mess it up. Sometimes we go too far. But we don't optimize for clean charts. Soren watched the data spike, not loud, but deep. Attention without panic. We decide in motion, Riven said. We don't wait for permission to adapt. And we don't treat fear like a final answer. A pause. If that scares you, he added, it should. It scares us too. He closed the channel. Nothing happened. No immediate response. No counter-statement. No backlash. Just quiet. Hours later, Soren detected the shift. They are sharing it, she said softly. Unedited. Riven blinked. That's a first. Your words are being debated, she continued. Not refuted. Debated. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Guess that's how it starts. Across the galaxy, institutions built on certainty found themselves arguing over intent instead of control. Strategists struggled to quantify something that refused to sit still. Younger analysts asked questions their mentors didn't like. And in places far from councils and fleets, ordinary beings, dockworkers, traders, technicians, heard a human say something that sounded uncomfortably familiar. We decide in motion. The invitation had changed shape. It was no longer about understanding humans. It was about whether the galaxy was willing to move the same way. Chapter 10. What happens after understanding? Understanding didn't arrive with applause. It arrived with friction. Across the galaxy, institutions that had been built on prediction began to grind. Advisory councils issued statements that contradicted earlier ones. Risk models updated so frequently they lost coherence. Old threat matrices were annotated with phrases that meant nothing to machines and everything to people. Context dependent. Non-deterministic. Responds to restraint. No one liked writing those words. They implied responsibility. On Kareth 9, Riven felt the change before he saw it. The shelter's external sensors no longer lit up with tight beam scans or passive sweeps. Instead, signals passed nearby with deliberate distance, like ships giving a wide berth to something they weren't sure how to name. Trade traffic skirted the system's edge, close enough to acknowledge, far enough to avoid commitment. They're treating this place like a fault line, Riven said, watching the data crawl. Soren stood beside him, arms folded, tail still. Fault lines are avoided until someone needs to cross them. The first visitor arrived without weapons. That alone would have been unthinkable weeks ago. A small courier ship dropped out of fold space well outside the old engagement radius, broadcasting its trajectory openly. Its hull markings were neutral, outdated, deliberately non-aligned. It requested permission to approach and offered nothing in return. Riven frowned. That's either brave or very stupid. Soren studied the signature. It is both. Which means it is sincere. They met the courier at the edge of the ruins, under a sky that had learned how to stay quiet. The being who disembarked was short, avian, feathers dulled with age rather than fear. No guards. No data escorts. Just a satchel and a careful posture. I was asked to listen, the courier said, translator soft and respectful. Not to judge. Riven nodded once. That's usually enough. Word spread, not fast, but steadily. Others followed. Not delegations. Individuals. Engineers curious about human redundancies. Cultural archivists trying to reconcile new narratives with old ones. Even a syndicate accountant, pale and nervous, who asked 3 questions and left with more than he'd arrived with. No treaties were signed. No alliances declared. But something subtle began to form in the negative space between decisions. Soren noticed it first. They are copying you. Riven looked up from a half-repaired coil. Flattering. Not your technology, she said. Your restraint. Your willingness to leave outcomes open. He paused, then nodded slowly. That's dangerous. Yes, she agreed. To systems that require certainty. The High Councils met in emergency sessions that never quite adjourned. Some factions argued for reasserting control, for forcing humanity back into a comprehensible shape. Others argued that doing so would only prove the human point, that systems afraid of adaptation eventually choose violence. The arguments went nowhere. Meanwhile, the quiet cooperation continued. Trade resumed in strange, decentralized ways. Repairs were made without invoices. Data was shared without attribution. Conflicts stalled because no one wanted to be the first to escalate against a species that had demonstrated it could vanish without conceding ground. Humanity became harder to threaten precisely because it didn't insist on being seen. One night, as Kareth Nine's long shadow crept across the valley, Soren stood beside Riven at the shelter entrance. You understand what you've done, she said. Riven watched distant stars flicker. I stopped doing what everyone expected. That is not a small thing, she replied. You have taught the galaxy a new kind of risk. He glanced at her. You regret stepping into it? She considered the question seriously. No, she said. But I no longer believe safety comes from control. Riven smiled faintly. Welcome to being human adjacent. She returned the smile, just barely. Far away, records updated again, not with warnings this time, but with something more tentative. Humanity, ongoing variable. Engagement recommendation, observe. Engage selectively. Avoid forcing outcomes. No one called it peace. No one called it victory. But for the first time since humanity had reached the stars, the galaxy had stopped trying to decide what humans were. It was waiting to see what everyone else would become. And that, quietly, changed everything. Chapter 11, The Choice That Kept Spreading. The galaxy never announced the change. There was no summit, no declaration, no moment where a voice rose and said this is different now. Systems like to pretend they move by decision. In truth, they move by habit, and habits shift quietly. Riven felt it in the smallest things. A trade drone altered course to avoid interfering with his signal window. A viral patrol passed through Kareth Nine's outer debris field and didn't scan. A syndicate relay pinged his shelter once, left a data cache of navigational updates, and vanished without comment. None of it asked permission. None of it demanded response. They're learning, Soren said, watching the feeds with careful eyes. Not about you. About themselves. Riven adjusted a panel on the generator, listening to the machine settle into a smoother rhythm. That usually takes a while. Yes, she replied. And it usually hurts. The valley where they'd first met had changed too. Fires had burned out, leaving blackened stone and drifting ash. Scavengers came now in daylight, cautious but not desperate. They kept distance. They shared space. A few even nodded when they saw the shelter's outline half hidden in the ruins. Human. Vulpine. Both words carried less weight than they used to. Soren stood at the edge of the ridge, tail moving slowly behind her. My people are divided, she said. Some believe you are a transitional anomaly. Others believe you are the beginning of a structural shift. Riven joined her, gaze fixed on the horizon. What do you believe? She took her time answering. I believe, she said, that the universe expected you to become something small when pressured. He smiled faintly. Yeah. We get that a lot. You didn't, she continued. You became sideways. Riven laughed quietly. That might be the nicest insult I've ever heard. A signal chimed behind them. Not urgent. Not invasive. A message queued itself politely, waiting to be acknowledged. Soren checked it, then looked up, surprised. It's a request, she said. From a joint panel. Viral Neutral Systems, Independent Observers. For what? Riven asked. She hesitated. They want you to advise. He blinked. On what? How to disengage from conflicts without losing leverage. Riven stared at her, then out at the ruins, then laughed, longer this time, rough and disbelieving. That's wildly irresponsible, he said. Yes, she agreed. They know. He thought about the moment she'd closed her eyes. About the universe that had been waiting for him to become what it feared. About how close it had come to being right. Tell them no doctrine, he said finally. Soren's ears angled forward. They will not like that. Tell them choices aren't templates. Riven continued. They're habits. You build them by doing the right thing when nobody's watching. She studied him, then nodded. I will tell them. The message went out. Simple. Unadorned. No framework attached. The reply didn't come immediately. It didn't need to. Later, as the stars shifted and Kareth 9 rotated slowly beneath them, Soren sat beside Riven inside the shelter, the quiet no longer heavy. They will keep watching you, she said. Riven leaned back, hands folded behind his head. They always were. Yes, she replied. But now they are watching for permission to change. He turned his head, meeting her gaze. That's on them. She smiled, fully this time. Not careful. Not guarded. The galaxy would argue for years about what had happened here. Analysts would trace lines back to Kareth 9, to a ruined valley, to a moment where a Vulpine woman closed her eyes and a human refused to behave. They would debate power, strategy, deterrence. They would miss the simplest part. Nothing had been conquered. Nothing had been taken. A single choice had been made, and then repeated. And the universe, unprepared for that kind of persistence, had begun to follow. Somewhere far away, a young officer paused before authorizing a strike and waited half a second longer than doctrine allowed. Somewhere else, a negotiator chose silence instead of threat. Somewhere, someone closed their eyes and lived. The galaxy didn't change because humanity demanded it. It changed because humans kept choosing not to become what fear required. And once that choice existed, it never really went away. Chapter 12. She opened her eyes. The last thing the galaxy expected was quiet to last. It did. Not perfect quiet. Not peace. The universe was still sharp in places. Borders still rubbed raw. Old grudges still waited for weather that favored them. But something fundamental had shifted, like a fracture that had sealed wrong and forced everything around it to adapt. On Kareth 9, dawn came slow and colorless. Riven stood at the edge of the valley where the dropship wreck still lay half buried. Wind pushed ash in soft lines across the ground, erasing yesterday's footprints. He hadn't come here out of nostalgia. He came because this was where the story actually started, whether anyone else knew it or not. Soren joined him without speaking. They stood there together, looking at the place where she had bled into the dust, where the universe had paused just long enough to show its hand. "This valley is logged in 6 major archives now," she said. "Classified as a convergence site." Riven snorted. "Figures. They argue over what changed here," she continued. "Doctrine. Deterrence theory. Adaptive leverage." He glanced at her. "And? They are wrong," she said calmly. Riven waited. "They think the galaxy changed because a human demonstrated power without violence," Soren said. "Because you embarrassed their models. Because you revealed a strategic blind spot." She turned to face him fully, golden eyes steady. "But none of that mattered without the first moment." Riven followed her gaze, to the wreckage, the scorched metal, the place she had lain broken and certain. "You closed your eyes," he said quietly. "Yes." "You thought I'd kill you." "I knew you would," she corrected. "According to everything I was taught." Riven exhaled slowly. "Yeah." She stepped closer, tail brushing the dust. "That is what changed the galaxy. Not what you did next. What you refused to do." The wind carried distant engine noise, civilian traffic, passing wide, respectful, unafraid. "They asked me sometimes," Soren went on, "why I trusted you after that." Riven raised an eyebrow. "You didn't." "No," she agreed. "I trusted the pause." He smiled at that. Soren looked back toward the sky. "When I closed my eyes, I accepted a story that had already been written. Human equals death. Mercy equals trick. Survival equals obedience." Her markings glowed softly now, no longer restrained. "You didn't replace that story with a better one. You left a blank space." Riven said nothing. "Once a blank exists," she said, "others will try to fill it. Some with fear. Some with control. Some with hope." She met his gaze again. "But it can never be closed." Above them, a ship broke orbit and folded away, leaving no wake. Somewhere else, far beyond Kareth 9, councils still debated. Fleets still repositioned. Analysts still wrote reports that circled the truth without touching it. But out here, where the ash had settled and the wrecks were cooling into history, the shape of things felt stable. Not safe. Stable. "You ever think about leaving?" Soren asked. Riven considered it. The shelter. The ruins. The strange gravity of a place that had become a reference point without trying. "Sometimes," he said. "But not yet." She nodded. "Good. The universe is still learning what to do with that choice." Riven glanced at her. "You staying?" "For now," she said. "Someone has to remind them how this started." They stood in silence, watching the light crawl across broken metal. Far away, in systems that had never heard of Kareth 9, decisions were being made differently. Not because of treaties. Not because of fear of retaliation. Because someone somewhere remembered that a human had been given a moment of certainty. And refused it. Soren closed her eyes. Just for a second. Then she opened them again. And the universe, having learned the difference, led her.